A mob boss punched Sammy Davis Jr. right on stage, in front of 3,000 people. And then Dean Martin made a move that changed Las Vegas forever. In Las Vegas, there are stories that stop being just stories and turn into legends. They're not written down in official records or biographies. They're passed along in whispers, from cocktail waitresses to casino dealers, from showroom managers to security guards. These stories may differ in details, but they all share one thing. They reveal the true soul of the city. Stories about power, about fear, about money, and sometimes, about real friendship. This is one of those stories. The story of the night Dean Martin drew a line that even the mob would not cross. Las Vegas, 1964. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand what Las Vegas was like in 1964. This was not the glossy, family-friendly entertainment destination we know today. This was not a sanitized corporate playground. Las Vegas was a city owned, quite literally, by organized crime. Casinos, hotels, showrooms, restaurants, everything was controlled by men who did not settle disputes with lawyers or contracts. They settled them quickly, brutally, and permanently. Performers knew the rules. Don't joke about the mob, don't cross the wrong people, and never forget who allowed you to work there. Breaking those rules could end a career. Sometimes, it could end a life. Who Sammy Davis Jr. really was. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most gifted entertainers of the 20th century. Even his enemies admitted that. He could sing, dance, act, do impressions, perform in musicals, star in films, and command an audience from the first second he stepped on stage. But in America in the early 1960s, talent did not protect you from racism. Sammy was a black entertainer in an industry still governed by unspoken but brutal rules of segregation. He could headline a show, yet be refused a room in the same hotel. His name could be written in massive letters on a marquee, yet he'd be forced to use service elevators and back entrances. He converted to Judaism. He married a white woman. And for that, he received hate mail and death threats. Every time Sammy walked on stage, it wasn't just a performance, it was a tightrope walk. The Rat Pack, his only real protection. The only thing that truly protected Sammy was the Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra was the leader. Political connections. Enormous influence. A volatile temper. Dean Martin was different. Dean didn't give speeches about loyalty. He didn't make grand statements. He simply showed up, quietly, consistently, without hesitation. The man called Angelo. The mob boss at the center of this legend is usually called Angelo. That wasn't his real name, but it's the name the story remembers. He was connected to East Coast crime families, had financial interests in multiple casinos, and possessed one extremely dangerous trait: he could not tolerate public disrespect. Especially from entertainers. Especially from comedians. And especially from black performers. 3 days before March 8, Sammy made a joke on stage. A mild, carefully worded mob joke about offers you can't refuse. The audience laughed. Jokes like that were common in Vegas, as long as they were subtle. But Angelo was in the audience that night, and he didn't laugh. He remembered. He stewed. And he drank. Confusion. Fear. Understanding. Accusations. Shouting. A racial slur spoken loudly, clearly, in front of 3,000 people. The band stops playing. The room goes silent. Sammy tries to calm the situation. He asks Angelo to leave. Instead, he's punched. The sound echoes like a gunshot. Sammy falls to the stage. Blood on his lip. Humiliation. Silence. The moment of choice. Security doesn't move. No one intervenes. Because this is the mob. And in Vegas, you didn't touch the mob. That's when Dean Martin hears the collective gasp from backstage. He knows instantly that something is very wrong. He steps out of his dressing room. Someone warns him. Dean, don't. He's killed people. Dean answers calmly. Sammy is my friend. And he walks onto the stage. Dean Martin versus the mob. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He simply places himself between Angelo and Sammy. Get your hands off my friend. He gives Angelo a choice. And he makes something very clear. If Angelo doesn't walk away, the entire entertainment world in Las Vegas will turn against him. The silence feels endless. Everyone waits to see who will blink first. And then, the impossible happens. Angelo steps back. He walks off the stage. Defeated. Publicly. The legacy. Sammy Davis Jr. never forgot what happened that night. Years later, he would say, "Frank was our leader. But Dean was the one who stood between me and the world." That isn't just friendship. That's brotherhood. And that's why this story still lives on. Not because it's Las Vegas. Not because it's the mob. But because in a world where everyone looks away, one man stepped forward and said, "Not today. Not my friend. Not on my watch." What happened on that stage didn't end when the curtains closed. Las Vegas never forgets moments like that. It absorbs them, studies them, learns from them. Within hours, the phones started ringing. Casino managers called other managers. Promoters called promoters. People who never spoke directly suddenly had mutual friends. One question traveled through the city like electricity. Did Dean Martin really do that? And the answer was always the same. Yes. He did. Dean Martin wasn't the loudest man in the room. He wasn't the smartest. And he definitely wasn't the most disciplined. But he had something far more dangerous. He was indispensable. Dean packed showrooms. Dean sold drinks. Dean kept tourists coming back. And more importantly, Dean was trusted. Casino owners trusted him. Studio executives trusted him. Politicians trusted him. Even the mob, quietly, trusted him, because Dean never caused problems. Until that night. Everyone expected consequences. A threat. A warning. A visit in the middle of the night. None came. Instead, something far more telling happened. Dean Martin's schedule remained untouched. No shows were cancelled. No bookings disappeared. No contracts mysteriously fell apart. In Las Vegas, silence like that meant only one thing. A decision had already been made, somewhere higher up. There was an unspoken rule in the mob world. You could be cruel. You could be violent. You could be ruthless. But you never embarrassed the organization publicly, unless you were prepared to pay for it. Angelo hadn't just attacked Sammy Davis Jr. He'd done it on stage. In front of witnesses. In front of press. In front of people who would talk. That kind of attention was bad for business. And bad for business was unforgivable. Sammy finished the show that night. But something in him shifted. Friends noticed it almost immediately. He became quieter backstage. More guarded. More tired. Not physically, emotionally. Years later, Sammy would admit that the punch itself wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the moment right before Dean walked out. That brief, horrifying realization that no one was going to help him. That if Dean hadn't come, no one else would have. A few nights later, Dean and Sammy sat alone in Dean's dressing room. No jokes. No drinks. No music. Sammy tried to thank him. Dean cut him off. "Don't," he said. "That's what friends do." Then he added something else. Something quieter. "They get away with it because people let them." That sentence stayed with Sammy for the rest of his life. Frank Sinatra heard the full story days later. He didn't say much at first. He listened. He paced. He lit a cigarette. Then he said one sentence. "Dean just changed the rules." Frank understood power better than almost anyone alive. And he understood exactly what Dean had done. Not by force. Not by threats. But by exposure. Dean hadn't beaten the mob. He'd embarrassed it. After that night, small things began to change. Not officially. Not on paper. But quietly. Sammy was no longer asked to use side entrances. He was given better rooms. Better treatment. More respect. Not because racism disappeared. But because touching him had become risky. And that was new. Years passed. The Rat Pack era faded. Las Vegas transformed. But the story survived. It changed details. It gained embellishments. It lost names. Some versions said Dean threatened the mob. Others said Sinatra was there. Some claimed guns were involved. They weren't. The truth was simpler. And more powerful. One man walked onto a stage. And refused to look away. Dean Martin was asked about that night exactly once in an interview. The reporter framed it like a heroic act. Dean smiled uncomfortably, shrugged, and said, "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't like what I saw." Then he changed the subject. That was Dean. No speeches. No mythology. No need for applause. The greatest irony of the story is this. Dean Martin was famous for playing the man who didn't care. The drunk. The clown. The smooth, detached entertainer. But when it mattered most, he cared enough to stand up. And that's why this story lasts. Not because of violence. Not because of the mob. Not because it happened in Las Vegas. But because courage sometimes looks very quiet, and sometimes, it walks onto a stage, and simply says,